How many entrepreneurs walk away from a term sheet from multiple investors that they have been working on for months? How many of those founders then pivot their companies and end up not just surviving, but thriving? Not many, I would presume. Building a startup is a constant balancing act between seizing opportunities and avoiding traps. Many founders get caught in the allure of venture capital, but end up handcuffed by restrictive terms that limit their ability to build the company they know they should be building. At the Asia InsurTech Podcast, we want to talk to founders that are open and honest about the struggles of entrepreneurship and the consequences and benefits of saying no, even when it is super risky. Tetiana George reached out to us recently to tell us that story. There's a lot to learn from her experiences. Let's go to Tetiana now. Tetiana, thank you so much for coming to the show. Our audience already knows you, just based on the previous time you've come on the show. Let's just jump right into the main part of this thing, if that's okay with you. How are you, by the way?
Sure. Very good. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
So, it's my complete pleasure. So, it's kind of a metaphorical question, but what is it like refueling in midair?
Spot on. Start with difficult questions, right, Michael?
Why not?
Yeah, I'll give a little background. Last time we were speaking, it was roughly 2 years ago, a bit more than 2 years ago. I was heavily pregnant and fundraising at the time.
All right.
And the long story short, we did not close the round at all. We can talk about it later, but effectively It was also this really, really tough time when investors turned from growth into profitability. And as an early stage company, both are hard at the very beginning. So effectively, we had to change course pretty drastically and pretty quickly, with a lot of damage that came along. So long story or short answer to your question, it's hard. And you need to kind of, I sat back. I think my daughter was just born and literally in the hospital. I was questioning everything. I was kind of thinking, okay, what would it take for me to run the business? What would it take for me to make this a success without external funding? And do I believe it's going to work? Do I believe there's a genuine product market fit? And do I believe we're genuinely solving a problem that is relevant to people? And so, as you can guess, the answer was yes. And two interesting things that happened through that fundraising round. We did get 2 term sheets with 2 different fees. So it wasn't, it was my decision to walk away from this, if I'm very honest. The conditions with which it came, it was not even golden handcuffs. It was just handcuffs.
do you want to walk through let's talk about this first, because I was going to say, like, what is this experience like trying to raise money and just having it not happen? You notice that I phrased this quiz not as like, because you failed at it, but you made this decision not to. And I want some of the other entrepreneurs out there to understand not the golden handcuffs, but the handcuffs part, if you don't mind. And I don't care who the investors were. It's none of my business, but just the terms that they were offering to you.
So it wasn't, to be very frank, it wasn't about valuations and things like that. As you know, back in 2022, every entrepreneur just saw kind of 50% shaved off all values. So it wasn't about that. It was about, when you start this business, it becomes your baby, and you want to raise it in the way you have a vision. You have the expertise, you have a vision, and you've invested everything. Well, in my case, I've invested everything, all of my money and my time and my talent. So the handcuff aspect is do you trust that the person who's next to you has your company's best interest at heart? You genuinely, if you put your hand on the heart and say, is this a good partner for me to run the business? And when it comes to making hard decisions or finding a different direction, will this person back me? And based on the conditions, the term sheets, I'll give you an example. My term sheet was 17 pages long. Unheard of.
Wow.
And the lawyer time and my time I spent negotiating that just gave me a very clear feeling and knowledge that it's not going to work. If I have to spend so much time on, 10,000 here and a dot point and something, I'll never run my business the way I want. Right? Yeah. And I want it fast, efficient, and to the point. That's my way of running the business. And that was for me, because, everything came together at the time, right? The war in Ukraine and I was pregnant and delivered a baby, everything came together. So your question to you is, it's really hard. Are you ready to take that on and live with those handcuffs, or would you rather shut down the business? You have to always ask yourself as a founder. And I said, if I have to do that, I'd rather shut it down. Because one thing people don't understand, or probably understand but don't really understand, the VC is a cycle. The moment you've done your first fundraise, you need to start about the next one. That thing cost me 8 months of my productive time. 70 to 90% of my productive time went into that. And that's, first, not my strength. And second, it's the most hated thing that I've ever done. And that's not why I started the company. I started the company to truly innovate and truly help people, not to fundraise.
Yeah, in a way, it sounds to me like a marriage, right? If you have to spend 8 or 9 months deciding on what the prenup looks like, what are you getting married for? Right?
Exactly.
What's the point? Right. And again, if that prenup just keeps getting longer, and if you're arguing literally over punctuation and wording, then you're not getting married. And I think it's a really great metaphor, at least in my mind, right? I think both of us have been married, and most of it kind of went like this. Do you want to get married? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Do you know what I mean? And that's kind of what a term sheet should look like to me. Exactly. Maybe with a few more legal things, because there are other things involved. But at its core, all these like preference shares and all this other stuff, I get paid back before anybody else gets paid back. It's like, do you trust this is a good idea, or don't you?
Why would you get paid before? The founders are the ones that put all of their life blood online. Why would some random party be that?
Exactly.
See?
Yeah, like, is the money more important than the idea and the effort, right?
Money is important, right? So the question is then, can you survive without this money? And everybody needs to be very, very honest, because you don't just create amazing things out of thin air, right?
No.
So that's the question. And I understand that sometimes we have to take the money, even though you're going to hate yourself up to that.
Maybe. But I mean, I bootstrapped for 5 years. For a long time. And it was really painful. And I don't think I'd take money from anybody right now. Our businesses are different structures and stuff like that. So I'm not saying people shouldn't take venture capital or investment money. But boy, once you do, you want the right people. And like you said, you want them to be on your side. So fair enough. How do you know when it's time to reinvent, though? Right. So you're sitting there, in a way, it forces you to make a whole bunch of different decisions, right? You're sitting there thinking, should I take it? You say no. Should I keep doing the thing that I'm doing? Do I believe that this is going to work at scale? Maybe. But then how do you decide when it's time to just reinvent the idea, even if you're going to keep going?
So at least in my case, it was very simple. And actually one really, really good thing that came out of these 8 months that I thought were wasted is what the market started telling me. So I have not been doing active sales, and I have not been doing active pretty much anything because I was fundraising. But one very interesting thing that the market told me, everybody, even if they don't understand insurance and, claims and whatever processes, everybody said, I think there's something in your compliance bit of the product. I think there's something. I listened to it. And I mean, we already had a proof of concept. We already had paying customers that paid for the little module that we had. And I was like, well, if we need to get to revenue much faster than I anticipated, and if we need to be, a lot more self-sustainable, let's just listen to what the market says. And this is how we pivoted.
How do you get this feedback, though?
Well, investors were giving me this feedback. And because I went through, I don't know how many due diligences, I had very honest conversations with industry people. So insurers, people who sit on boards, brokers from the middle of nowhere. Literally, I was put through tens of interviews where they were interviewing me, on the soundness of my business. And literally all of them hinted at that one thing. They said, but that is interesting. And I listened. I would do this. It's almost like a philosophy, not almost, it is a philosophy right now of our business. We listen. We genuinely listen.
But couldn't this be like one of the biggest things that you learned beside this idea of I don't want to take money from people that don't trust my ideas are going to work? This idea of I'm just listening to what the market's telling me. Yeah. Because if the market keeps telling me, here's the thing, and I like to make restaurant analogies, right? It's like if I have this restaurant and everybody comes in and says, can I have ice cream for dessert? And you're like, yeah, it's not on the menu. And then everyone just keeps asking you like, we should have ice cream on the menu here.
That's precisely my point.
No?
This year, so I'm kind of running out of myself, but this year we took that exercise to the next level. We actually hired one of the most brilliant service designers in this country, in Australia, and we asked her to get opinions and like perform the research of, and because we're now, the specialist in compliance, it's not necessarily what people tell you, because their needs are not always surfaced and vocal, but it's also what do they not tell you and how do you interpret that? So we have taken that exercise to next level. We've run that research and we've doubled our functionality in probably 6 or 8 months just because of that, because they kind of clearly tell you this is what I need. This has not been addressed by anyone. And we're like, okay, of course, then we're going to do it for you.
So you've already pointed out like how you decided to move into this compliance space. Maybe you can give the listening base a little bit more detail on exactly what this means and why it's so important at scale.
Yeah, so I'll give you a sense of our geography, because I know people are in slightly different countries. So for a population of 25, 26 million people, Australia has a very, very high number of insurers. So the fully regulated ones, we're probably looking at over 100 of those, life and non-life. There's also a concept of an MGA, Managing General Agency, here in Australia. And based on my estimates, we're probably looking at 250 of those. And there are probably more than 5,000 brokerages. Okay.
That's a lot for a country of 26 million people.
Yeah, so we're talking billions and billions tens of billions of dollars of annual revenues. Plus, there's a very wide range of suppliers to the industry. And all of these people are very heavily regulated. There are 5-7 regulators that are very active, including privacy, protection of customer rights, conduct in the financial services, product design, balance sheets, risks, everything. So the regulators are very active. There's an update on average every month or so in some of the legislation, regulation, industry codes, and so on and so forth. It's very, very active. And I'll give you a sense of it. Even if you're a 3-people brokerage in the middle of, New South Wales, if you have a financial services license, which you must have if you want to do broking, your legal obligations are going to be in probably between 100 and 120 different ones. It's very intense, okay?
Yeah.
So, and because Australia is this very interesting combination of very large players, but also very high numbers of very small players, and that are all regulated by different regulators. It's not all the same regulator. The general problem for the industry is pretty substantial. Because unlike if you're a large insurer, you can have a head of compliance, a head of risk, and a specialist, and this and that. And if you're literally a 5-people brokerage or a supplier that doesn't services other industry and insurance, it's impossible. You can't just keep throwing money at the problem. And again, in Australia, wages are very high. So the minimum wage is very, very high. And a wage for somebody with that type of expertise, you're probably looking $150,000 plus.
Wow. Can I ask you this? Does it seem to you like the regulations are built for large organizations that do have a head of compliance, right? In the sense that, and even though there are 5,000 brokers, all of them cannot have like 10,000 people in them. Some of them probably have 3, some of them even probably have 13. But it feels to me like the regs, since they're so complex and they're constantly changing, feel like they're made for the biggest players, and the small players just kind of have to drag themselves along to kind of keep up, no?
Well, I don't know if it's right to say they're made for somebody. I think, to be honest, I've actually read those. And the regulations are made for the customer primarily.
Yeah, fair enough.
So
Good
the
answer.
regulations are made to protect the customer, and the effect of that can be quite onerous on an individual firm.
So what have people been doing up until now? You're right. If the minimum wage is high and you're a 4 or 5 person brokerage and you don't have a head of compliance, but you still have to comply with all of these rules and regs. You said 120 different regs at least. But what have people been doing? Like just running on a treadmill every single day just to keep up? Do you know what I mean?
Yep. Pretty much.
Easy answer.
So a lot of the times, and kind of, we've been in the market for a while, right? We talk to a lot of people. So they don't do anything sometimes, or they do very little. And the majority of the people does the bare minimum. And effectively, for a long time, when we walked in the room and, educated people about this is the law, this is what you need to do. And they were like, well, tell me about who's been caught.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So what is the enforcement mechanism behind it? And that kind of, sometimes when the conversation then is like, well, you can't name anyone who lost their license or something like that. So why bother?
Right.
Come back to me. I'm too small, and it's not a good thing, because one of the regulators quoted to us that they prosecuted someone in Australia every business day of last year.
Oh my.
Court. So it's happening. It's just
Yeah. In a way, it sounds to me like the speed limit on the highways in the United States, right? Like if I'm in a hurry and it's a 55 or 65 mile per hour speed limit, I might go 80 because my chances of getting caught are so small. And then they put up the cameras that kind of test your speed, and then you get a radar detector. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
At some point, you're going to have to give and just comply.
So the regulators are moving away from this point by point kind of individual audits into data sweeps. They're moving away from the way they're collecting information, and they're not going to be doing, let me go and manually review your files. No, they're going to scan you in the bigger picture and compare you with the size of yours and say, okay, this is too little or too much, or there are like irregularities here. So this is where it's going. In Australia, I think is following a little bit in the footsteps of EU and UK in that sense. So if you look at their regulation, they're slightly more ahead of us in certain things. But nevertheless, I mean, they're much bigger, right?
Yeah, for sure. So let's get back to kind of the tech side of this, or the solution side of this. What does Curium do, and how does it do it to help disintermediate these problems? Because like you said, some of these small companies, if they're what did you say? If they're prosecuting somebody every day, the statistics, like the probabilities are against you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is Curium doing to try to disintermediate this problem?
So it's another story of many pivots, but smaller ones. So we've started with just providing people with a simple cloud-based technology where we've coded some of the biggest frameworks and we've automated, let's say, data collection, things like that. We started with that. We ran with it for a little bit, and then we realized people don't necessarily use them because they don't know why they should use them.
Right.
So then we said, okay, let's move to the next level and let's add knowledge into this. So then we started training people. So I've calculated in the last 18 months, we've probably trained 900 insurance professionals.
Wow.
Then we started training them. Then now you understand what it is. And then we said, okay, it's still not enough because you need to start embedding the knowledge into the tech. So I'll give you an example. The 120, different regulations. We've created a library for all of Australia with all financial services regulations by ASIC, specifically by one regulator, but they encompass kind of a lot of laws. So we said, okay, when they change, we'll just push the update automatically to you, so you don't need to worry. You don't need to go and run. So long story short, we're going the way of merging technology and knowledge and distributing the knowledge through technology. And what I like as a kind of maybe a shorter version of that, we say we're compliance in a box. So you just get the whole thing. Everything you need, get it in one place.
And is there like an API connectivity that people have to you? They just have to connect to this knowledge so that it goes out to everybody at the same time? Like, how does that work?
It's a cloud-based system that lives next to your systems. There are many ways connecting it into different things. But to be kind of down to earth, most of our products don't need connections to start with, and they can go live within 1 hour. So we don't do any implementations and things like that. We kind of
makes it
bring the
easier.
toolkit with us, and the technology piece of it is really easy. The heart and mind is the more challenging one.
It's the hard part. As always, the humans are the hardest part. You must work super closely with the regulators, though, right? Did that take time to build those relationships?
Well, official position of regulators is that they're not associated with anyone.
For sure.
But it took me a while to start being in the right rooms, let me put it this way, to be in the right rooms. And I am the director of the board for InsurTech Australia, and that definitely it really helps, yes. Because first, I can advocate on behalf of broader group of companies, but also it's very valuable to hear what the regulators say from them. There's a lot of myth and a lot of misconception going around in the industry. In hearing all that, I find it's very important to go to the source and say, what do you really think? What do you really want? What's your intention with this one?
Yeah, you're not listening to somebody else's interpretation. You're talking directly to them. That makes it so much easier. Is there an AI aspect to your product?
The what, sorry?
Artificial intelligence.
It's the hard one. There is, and I'll kind of run ahead of it. So,
please.
We are currently testing the idea of what's called auto detection. So instead of relying on people doing the right thing and logging and checking and, processes running well, we're trying to get into the systems that they're using, for example, email, and auto detect any irregularities straight away.
Interesting.
But it's a very work intense problem. And the other aspect of it, we've tried it with insurer systems before. I'll be very honest about it. The quality of the data that we were getting is so poor.
From the insurers, yeah. Yeah.
And we could not even get 50% accuracy on that one. Because
but I want to be clear about this.
Garbage out.
Yeah, again, I want to be clear on this. Not because your technology wasn't working, but because the data that it was analyzing was just like maybe kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and that was the biggest issue in we've been trying it for a few years now. It's just not happening. So we now have another test how to do this with a lot more accuracy. And funnily enough, it's emails. As mundane as that sound, it's a lot more accurate than the actual core system data from different insurers.
Yeah, I mean, email could probably use the quote from Mark Twain that says, like, the reporting of my death has been vastly overstated.
Yeah, so
I don't think email's going away.
The hardest problems, as solutions to them, are actually quite easy. As in, I'm not saying it's easy, but it has taken us a lot of very complex attempts to get to the point to try something fairly easy.
Got it. So we talked at the beginning about what it was like refueling in midair, right? And that's really about changing the company itself and maybe the products. But when you revamp the product, and this reminds me of the story I heard about Netflix, right? When they stopped sending DVDs in red envelopes to people and started streaming, they literally had to revamp their entire management team because the expertise that they needed to handle streaming was way different than what they needed to just handle mailing stuff to people. So I would ask you the same thing. When you revamped the product, did you also have to revamp management and the staff?
Well, we're not too heavy on management, if I'm honest.
Fair enough.
Well, I've done, unfortunately, early in my career, I've done too many delayering exercise when they fire the managers, after the GFC. Yeah. So I believe in everybody being an individual contributor. So whoever works for us has to do stuff. No,
Right. There's nobody just saying, you do this, you do that. It's like, I'll take care of that.
no
She'll take
delegators.
it. Right. No delegators. I love it.
So everybody is doing stuff. And our team looks very, very different. And the team knows, and also these kind of jokes about me in the insurtech scene here is like, it must be horrible working for you.
Really?
We don't stay with people who don't kind of fit this mentality of let's be fast, fact driven, result driven, and we do things. We don't put them on other people's shoulders.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you look at my business card, it says I do everything that my business partner doesn't do. There's no like specific delineation. We're not as big as you are. We're not as like well established as you are, but we wrote that down for a reason. I'll take care of it if you can't take care of it.
Exactly.
We're not going to hire someone to do that thing until the revenue is so high that it justifies actually hiring that person. But the other thing as well is there are no delegators. To me means everyone gets autonomy at some level to do the things that they're really great at. And I think humans want that, no? Like you joked before, like, must be hard to work for you. But on the flip side, do you want to be micromanaged? Is the other question you have to ask yourself as an employee, no?
You want to be micromanaged. And also because we have this thing about listening to our clients, right? We are very, to your back to your analogy about the restaurant. I get so irritated in restaurants when I told them something and they just forgot or brought me something else. I'm like, just need to listen.
Right.
So
it's not that hard.
It's not that hard. So we do exactly the same with people. Like we want to hear their opinions. Even the most junior people, when they first start, we give them access to our system and give us a fresh view. What's missing? What's not easy? What's not obvious? Just tell us. Just bring it on, you know?
Yeah, I agree. We do the same thing. We bring on new people. It's like, we've been doing it this way for a while because that's the only way we knew how to do it. Does this look right to you?
Exactly.
I'd rather have them say, no, it doesn't. Here's a better way. Yeah.
Exactly. Because you risk to be too deep in your own rabbit hole and then somebody else comes from a very, very different angle. And you're like, this is a good idea.
Exactly. And I always like to say, like, I do not have a monopoly on the right idea. I definitely do not. Talk to me about this new strategic partnerships that you have and maybe if there's anything investment related to it as well.
Yeah. So I have actually very, very positive experience with investment.
Finally. Yay.
When you gave up, this is when it happened. So after the pivot, we decided to, earn the money. And we started serving quite a few underwriting agencies or MGAs. So an MGA is called underwriting agencies. We started serving them and we kind of got into a group of companies that were underwritten by an insurer local here. And then they started noticing us. And then they did a little presentation at an InsurTech and they said, well, we have this insurance business here, but we also have kind of a venture arm, but not a VC arm, more like a venture arm.
Yep.
And this is when we started talking because we're already serving their clients effectively. We're already serving their portfolio. And then they started looking at us and said, actually, it's a good business to invest
We should be in that business.
Yeah, it's a South African group that has different licenses across the world and different businesses. And here in Australia, they kind of hungry to grow. So we're one of their investment companies. And the process was actually pretty cool because first they said, we're never going to take the majority. So we're going to be a significant stakeholder, but you run the company. So we just want to be meaningful, but not overbearing. Right. Most agreements that we had were very kind of, this is my handshake. This is what it is. Of course, we provided all the data. We went through what felt like 47 rounds of strategy. But it was really good because what it tells us is where is the market that we're going to focus on and what is it that we're going to do? And most importantly, what is it that we're not going to do? So we're very, very clear on that. We're not wasting time. We're not trying to be everything for everyone. And with by now, the partnership is almost 8 or 10 months old.
Awesome.
We've had many different hiccups and things and problems, I've always had a feeling they've got our back, and they're very active in helping, supporting, sparring partner, interest aligned. Like I have a really good experience with this. And main thing, they're not a VC. I'm not in this death spiral of dilution. That's the strategic element of it.
Yeah, and you're also not in this cycle of, 7 to 10 years where you have to have an exit at a specific amount of time because they're not making money off of your business. They're making money off of the exit. It's a really different world in which to live. And to me, nothing against the venture capital business, but that feels like a better model, particularly on the company side. No?
To me, it's the problem that I've experienced with venture capitalists is, funnily enough, is not quite that, but their lack of understanding of our business.
Yeah.
And through the lack of understanding, the everyday decision making becomes slightly skewed towards what they know, and not
right,
and not towards what they don't know. So
yeah. Again, we always say, like, if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail,
exactly,
right? So
exactly.
So one more thing, at least, does this open you up, since you're an investor or your partnership, your strategic partner, let's say, is outside the country? It seems to me if you can establish this expertise inside of Australia, that the opportunity outside of Australia could also be huge. Are there any plans you think to expand outside once you dominate the market internally?
Absolutely. We kind of already started.
Awesome.
And one of the due diligence kind of processes was testing the concept and the problems in other countries. So absolutely, it's just a matter of execution. It's not a matter of if, it's probably a matter of when. And to be very honest, some of our customers are already beyond Australia. So we're almost playing catch up on getting them the service they need beyond. So it's another customer. Yeah.
I always say, like, I've been on like a great vacation, and even if you go broke, like, they can't take that experience away from you. Like, it never leaves you. You still remember like what it was like to walk down that beach, even if you can't afford to go back to that place. But for you, it feels like kind of reverse. Like, things are getting really, really hard. And now they seem to be way better, which is awesome. Congratulations to you and your entire team. But do you have any of this PTSD? Like, this could happen again kind of thing? Do you know what I mean? Because it's hard to get rid of that feeling, no?
You'll never get rid of that feeling. It can still happen. You can still miss it. Like it's not over.
I know.
It just, see, now the difference is, and I'm sure a lot of people, entrepreneurs, relate to that. When you're on your own or like with your partner or something, it's very lonely. So when you have this either great idea or horrible idea, or you just don't know what to do, you don't have like a sounding board. Nobody to really talk to you. Like, you can talk to your husband, which I do all the time, or wife,
Right.
Still, they're not out there with you in those meetings, and And so what I found is this support. So first through the investment, but through the investors, but also through community of other people that I started building around myself. You talk. And you can always be in horrible kind of state. You can always run out of money. Your investment might not work out. Your strategic bet. It's always going to happen. What I'm trying to say is, I'm trying to be slightly more, not ahead of the curve, but fine-tune before and kind of try to check and test. So if I do an experiment, I wouldn't throw all of my money and just go do it. I'd probably take smaller steps and try to be, okay, does it work? Does it not work? What is the indication that it's going to work?
Yeah, I like it. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I really appreciate you being so open about something that a lot of people, a lot of founders and entrepreneurs don't really talk about. I'm really glad you reached out and asked me, I want to do this, because I do remember saying to you 2 years ago or more, you're welcome to come back on the show. And we've actually run into each other at conferences and stuff like that. And I said to you, welcome to come back on the show anytime. And when you pinged me, and I was like, this is going to be awesome.
I just really wanted to have a coffee with you in Bangkok.
Okay. Okay.
It's all good.
My bad.
No.
My bad. Okay. Tetiana George, co-founder and the CEO of Curium. Thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate it. The offer still stands. You can come back anytime you want.
Thank you. Maybe next time will be some of my awesome team members or my co-founder.
I'd love it. Would love it as well. Would love it as well. And actually, I will say this before I let you go. We have a studio in Bangkok too. So the next time you're here, if you can make a little bit of time, we can record in person, face to face, and that would be super cool.
I'll be there in April.
Let's do it. Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Michael.